welcome to another episode of the Marvel Masterworks podcast and Vidcast. I'm your host, Adam, and with me, as always, is the Emerald Enthusiast, but for the purposes of this show, we call him the Venom Enthusiast. Donnie, how's it going?
Hey, what's up, comic book fans? It's the man whose ring runs on fanboy energy, the podcasting machine, the big nerd in green. It's the Emerald Enthusiast, or the Venom Enthusiast, here to talk to you today about Spider-Man.
Yeah, we're going to climb some walls today. Well, not really. But we have a special guest with us. People seem to want to come on this show for whatever reason, and we didn't bribe to pay them. So it's cool to have our guest here. So, Donnie, take it away. Give him one of your introductions, and then we'll get into it.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and beings of the Omniverse, your web-slinging guru for the day, from the Italians for Spidey podcast, this is Nikko Caruso!
I'm saving it. It will be the answering machine. It will be the answering machine. We talked about that right before we recorded. Guys, so happy to be here talking Spidey. Whenever we're talking Spidey, it's the greatest thing in the world for me. So glad that, Adam, you reached out, and heck of an introduction from Donnie there. So I think the tone's set, and my Spidey senses are definitely tingling for this show.
It's going to be a fun show. So let's get right into it. Before we get into it, we've got some basically the main meat and potatoes of the show today is going to be a review of Amazing Spider-Man 75 through 77, which is the Beyond era of Spider-Man. I kind of like that title because it reminds me of Batman Beyond, so there's that. But anyway, so we're going to talk about that, but there was a Disney Plus Day, I think it was called, and there's some announcements, some cool Marvel stuff on the way. So we'll dig into that a little bit. But before we do all that, Nikko, tell us a little bit about your Spider-Man fandom, when it started, your first Spider-Man comic, your favorite live-action Spider-Man, the whole 9 years. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Well, wow. Okay, cool. I'm excited for this. So for me, Spider-Man was always like, he was really the first big superhero I ever got into. So the Vigilante 1939, the other show I do that I'm so lucky to do with my father. He's the one who I always say he corrupted me in the best way. He brought me into this space. You know, kids were reading like Dr. Seuss and Green Eggs and Ham, and I was reading Spider-Man and Batman and Justice League, etc. But it was really with my big introduction to Spider-Man. There was this massive explosion with that first film came out, the first Sam Raimi film starring Tobey Maguire. I was like 6 years old when that came out, and I remember my dad had this cool gig at the time where he got like an early screening. There was like an early fan one that we got to go see, and he took me, and I don't remember it, but he says I had fun because I was so young. Yeah. So it was that. And then it was that whole year of 2002, then, rewatching it when it came out on DVD. And then my Aunt Sina, actually, there was a Blockbuster down the street from her house when those were still a thing, when going rent to movies, I'm still old enough to remember those. I'm not too young to the point where those, I've been to the family videos, the Blockbusters, etc. And they actually had like a life-size foam replica mannequin of the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. And there was a contest to win it, and she won it. So that was my birthday present in like 2003 when I was turning 8. And so when I got that, it was huge. It was like kind of scary at first because it's like his size. But then I dove back into that film, and my dad showed me the 90s cartoon. And which is like the cream of the crop. So I binged that. We watched it like over and over and over and over and over. I would have friends over from school. We would watch it. And then that show introduced me to, in my opinion, the greatest suit in comic book history of all time, the Black Spider-Man suit. So then I started diving into those comics. So I think one of the first Spider-Man comics I ever read was in a trade paperback for Secret Wars, was Secret Wars 8, where he gets that suit, which like at the time I didn't really understand what was going on, that it's in the middle of this intergalactic dimensional war that all these heroes got brought together for. But that's really the first one I remember. And then Adam and I were talking about this. One of the first things I actually started reading on my own a few years later after the second film came out was Ultimate Spider-Man, because that was coming out at the time, and Peter was younger and I was starting to get like age 10, 11. So I was starting to like become the age, even though he was like 15 in that book, he was in high school. I still didn't know what it meant to be in high school yet, but that was more relatable. He was younger and it was going on at the time. So going to the comic shop with my dad, I was getting something new. Cause I don't remember what the Amazing title, what was going on at that time. But that's really my entrance into it. And then, for the next, 15 years of my life, it's been everything Spidey. And, I'm biased, but my favorite live action one is Toby. And, I might be seeing him again in a month or so,
That's
which
what they tell us.
makes me as happy as can be. That's probably going to be like the biggest, for some people, Keaton coming back is going to be the biggest thing of their life. For me, for the longest time, which is awesome. I'm so pumped for that too, because I think he's one of the GOATs as well. For a lot of people, including me, Star Wars The Force Awakens was incredibly huge. But when I see this Spidey come back, if he comes back, the guy who got me into it, it's going to be the coolest thing ever. I also think he's the most relatable superhero of all time. And I'm not sure if you guys know this or if you've heard other podcasts have been on or you hear it, but I'm someone who stutters as well. And when I was a kid, it was way worse. And like, I'm not looking for like, oh, like the woe is me thing, but sometimes school was hard and I related to Peter Parker in that aspect,
Totally get that. Yeah.
Superman was like the good looking guy and Batman was doing his thing, but Spidey had like real life problems going on and was dealing with like, how to grow up in ridicule and stuff and some family stuff and all that was very relatable to me. So, that's why I love a film like Into the Spider-Verse so much. Cause the message that anyone could be Spider-Man, I really think is true. He is the most relatable superhero of all time to me, and that's why to me he's the greatest of all time.
Well, the reason you were talking about the stuttering thing and how that his problems help you relate to Spider-Man, that's the same reason that for me, love Spidey 100%, but my Marvel guy is Daredevil.
Oh,
the reason is because he's got a disability, and so do I got the cane. I'm not blind, but I got the cane, so I totally get that. And I'm how long have I been doing it now? Since '93, I've been doing karate. So when I was a kid, when I started, in my head, the goal was, all right, this is going to lead to one of three things. I'm either going to be Batman, a Power Ranger, or a Ninja Turtle, and none of those three happened. But then I started reading Daredevil, and I'm like, maybe I could be Daredevil. That's the close. Little did I know that if I actually tried this, I'd probably get killed 3 nights.
Oh, likewise.
3 nights into the job. But I digress. So I totally get what you're saying with the relatability and stuff like that.
Yeah, very cool to hear. Thank you for sharing that too.
Yeah, no problem.
So, although sometimes with for me that the aches and pains of age, I kind of wish I had the symbiote to do a little bit of healing.
But you can relate to Old Man Steve, I guess. I'm kidding, Donnie. I was just joking.
No, Nikko, I'm old enough to remember Spider-Man on the Electric Company when it was actually airing in its first airing.
That's awesome, man.
Awesome.
Gather around the Commodore 64, children, and I'll tell you the story of the spinner rack.
Oh, the spinner rack. You talk to kids about that. They're like, why don't you get it on my phone? What are you guys talking about? What is this spinning thing you guys are talking about? But yeah, no, so that's an awesome details there. And I really like hearing about other people's entrance into comic books and fandoms of particular characters. But speaking of not necessarily the comics, but the extensions of the comics, which are the live action shows and movies, Disney Plus is giving us a lot of stuff coming up in the next year or 2 or 3 or however many. I mean, we got a lot of title cards with no specific dates, so I don't know when these things are coming out, but they're coming. One of the things they announced that I'm stoked for, based on what we saw in What If, is the Marvel Zombies animated series. I am not somebody that, like, outside of the superhero realm, if you ask me to watch The Walking Dead or Night of the Living Dead or whatever zombie movie you want to throw me, I'm not a zombie guy. It's just not my thing. But the What If episodes with the Marvel Zombies, I was all about it. I'm like, I need more of this. I didn't know I wanted this in my life, but I need more of it. And we're getting more of it. And so I'm excited about that. Where are you guys at with what are your thoughts on more Marvel Zombies? Do you think it'll work as a continuing animated series, or do you think it's best left as a one-off?
Oh, yes, there's lots of source material. And, I'm kind of the opposite of Adam in this aspect because I love The Walking Dead. I like, much of the zombie genre. So I'm stoked for this. I love the episode. That was actually my favorite episode of What If. So bring on the zombies. The more the merrier. So,
Nikko, what's your take on zombies?
So for me, I'm kind of like Donnie here. I was into The Walking Dead for a long time. I love films like 28 Days Later, even though those aren't really zombies, but that's one of my favorite horror films of all time. I feel like there was a massive zombie like awakening in like starting in like 2010, and I feel like it's still around a little bit. But like I played the Call of Duty games a lot, and there was like the Nazi zombie game mode. So I'm cool with zombies. The Marvel zombies comic wise is something I never got into, but I know what it is conceptually. I know a lot of people love it. I think it's a cool concept. And unfortunately, I'm still one of the people who hasn't watched What If, but I like how I'm all for.
Spoilers, there's a Marvel Zombies episode.
Oh yeah. No, you're fine. But I'm all for them continuing to just put out a lot of stuff at once.
Yeah.
I think it's so important. We're living in this golden age where I actually think like, I'm not going to say quantity over quality, but I think like if you got something you want to do it, especially on this service and the way that Disney has successfully managed this IP. I'm all for it so that you have that for the fans of the zombies. I think it's super cool for the people who love the comic series as well and the action figures and the Funko Pops that they did. So I think it's awesome. And I have a feeling when I do watch What If, that's going to be an episode I really like because a lot of people said it was their favorite as well. So that gets me excited.
Awesome.
And in this day and age, like you said, the golden age, with all the streaming services out there, if Marvel Studios wasn't putting out this content, they would instantly get focus taken off of them because they can't simply wait for the next blockbuster. We don't know how long this pandemic is going to complicate things. So.
But Donnie, some people think it's over. What are you talking about?
Like a certain celebrity on Twitter who I won't go into it.
Oh yeah. Oh no. Yeah.
Although I will say about you guys, both of you mentioned The Walking Dead. There's one thing I really liked about The Walking Dead, and that's Lauren Cohen. And you know who she played, Donnie? Martha.
Why did you say that name?
There you go. I have to make you do it.
And so Thomas Wayne was Negan, and then Thomas Wayne was Negan.
Exactly. See, that's to me, that's all. That's part of the multiverse now.
Multiverse,
yeah.
Barry screwed something up, and now they were part of The Walking Dead.
I would love it's funny. I would love even if like he did it as a joke. I would love if somebody did like an episode or a 10-second clip or where it's Jeffrey Dean on The Walking Dead, and he tells a story. He's like, in this multiverse, my son is Batman, but in a different one, he's dead, and I'm like a violent Batman. Well, man, that gets me really excited. I don't know, Rick. I think like
I tune in. You know what? I tune in for that. I tune in for that.
I like you got the intonation down there.
Perfectly. Oh, dude, he's great. He's so fun to try to play around with.
They also announced Echo, which is especially exciting for me because it was a character that was introduced in the Daredevil comics fairly recently, and she's going to be popping up in Hawkeye first, and then they're going to obviously spin her off into her own show. There have been reports from various insiders and scoopers that this show is going to feature several members of the Daredevil on Netflix cast, and it's going to act as a quasi soft reboot of the Daredevil franchise to bring them into the MCU. Awesome. So if it does that, like where do I sign? I already gave them my money because they have my subscription.
They already have your money
to do to get this fast. Like who, So, and also Echo has her she's I believe deaf or partly deaf. So there's that representation aspect of it that is important as well. Not just the fact that yes, they're bringing back Daredevil, which please, but aside from that, the representation part is cool. So I'm excited to see her in Hawkeye first. Hawkeye is very exciting for me, not necessarily because I'm the hugest fan of Hawkeye, but because that show does have one of my multiverse wives in it, which is Haley Steinfeld. And so I've got to click the pen because that's my shtick on the show.
How long do we go today before you mention the multiverse wives list?
I didn't time it, but
you know what, Adam? We'll have to compare our list when the show is over because mine runs pretty large too.
Oh, mine is like, you know what? Since it's almost Christmas, Santa Claus thinks he's got problems keeping track of the list. Now you got no problem, no problems whatsoever. But yeah, so Echo is something like you can't really comment on it because there's not much there. Mm-hmm. But I'm all for it. As you said, the more the merrier, kind of deal. Secret Invasion we knew about. All they really gave us was a picture of a bearded Samuel Jackson, which is cool. But I mean, what can you say about Samuel Jackson and Nick Fury?
Yeah, he's
perfect casting. I think we can all agree on that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
They gave us, let's see. And okay, so there's two animated things that I'm really excited and I really want to key in on. Mm-hmm. I won't save this till last because we're doing the Spider-Man show, so I'll save that till last. But they announced a continuation of X-Men, the animated series. It's going to be titled X-Men 97. I can't tell you, like, look, they gave us a lot of stuff. They gave us, small previews of other things. And that was all cool. Like Moon Knight, I'm over the moon for. Pun intended.
Well, I was gonna say,
but X-Men 97, it's like there were 3 cartoons in the 90s that to me were the foundation of my television watching, and they were Batman the Animated Series, Spider-Man 94, and the X-Men. So like, I know and they said it's coming in 2023, but I need this now. So time travel, DeLoreans, anybody got any? Because I need that. But a lot of the cast is returning, the voice cast, which is great. I've tried reading X-Men. I'd love to read X-Men, but it's so confusing, and there's so many X-Men titles. I'm like, where do I start? So I just default back to the cartoon and say, sure, that's my X-Men. And when they want to give me a comic that looks and feels like that, I'll start from issue number 1. But until then, that's my X-Men. And so I'm stoked about this. What are you guys' thoughts?
It wouldn't surprise me if there's some kind of comic tie-in when that starts, whether it be directly tying into the cartoon or just a relaunch. You'll get your opportunity.
Well, good. Marvel, here's my money. Make that happen.
Right. Yeah, as always.
The whole wall. You can have the whole wallet. There's not much in there right now, but who knows?
Just take it all.
Peel the leather off and sell it. Do whatever you want. I don't care.
And we'll cover that right here on the Marvel Masterworks podcast, available on YouTube, iTunes, and Podbean.
Yeah, we're going to do reviews of we're going to go back and do reviews of the X-Men animated series, as we will of Spider-Man as well at some point.
I have to do a shameless plug, Nikko, every show.
Oh no, I love it. I love it. That's what we got to start doing on our shows. I got to talk to all my
So what are you guys' thoughts on the X-Men revival?
It's awesome. That's another one that my dad showed me. I think during my Spider-Man awakening explosion. Yeah. That sounds weird to say that, but I guess that's what it was. I did not want to use the word awakening, but it's the only one that I thought say it. These guys are safe. This is a safe
movie title.
Space. Yeah, right. Yeah, Spider-Man: The Awakening. Awaken the Spider. That cartoon. And that cartoon was raw. It's awesome. Yeah. I'm with you too. Like that's kind of my X-Men. Because X-Men is something I did try to read, and every time I do, I get overwhelmed. Like it's so dense, and there's so much out there, and there's a lot of of course, when you ask, there's someone thinks this run is the greatest, someone thinks this run is the greatest, and then you're like, oh, I'm just going to read both, and then it gets overwhelming. And there's so many characters, and I have such a respect for the X-Men because they were really just in doing my own research growing up when they came out with that. They really looked to push the envelope of what characters could do in terms of their backstory, representation, political, social commentary, etc. And that's why I think there's such a cool opportunity for when they bring them into the MCU now. I think the stories they could tell with them, and bringing the X-Men into a modern day, I think could be really important. But I think that's awesome. I'm going to be there watching it. I think the coolest part is that pretty much all the voice cast is coming back. Yeah. Which I think is awesome because it shows how passionate they are about it. And for a lot of people, those are the X-Men, like the animated Spider-Man cartoon is like one of my definitive versions of the character in all forms. So I think it's awesome. And like we said, the thing I love about Disney Plus, not to segue to a different IP, but like what they're doing with Marvel and Star Wars, I think is incredible because they're doing a perfect balance of like, here's something that you fans want and have wanted for years, whether it be a character like Ahsoka Tano, who fans have craved to see on the screen. Okay, we're going to give you her show. And then when it comes to, Obi-Wan, etc. And then here's some of the new stuff like Acolyte, blah, blah, blah. And then from the Marvel standpoint, here's Hawkeye coming back, here's Wanda coming back, but also here's all these new like characters that you've never heard before. Here's a revival of an animated show that's considered the gold standard. Now here's a new one for Spider-Man. Here's zombies coming off What If. It's like there's something for literally every type of fan. And I think it's so impressive. It's so impressive to me.
Yeah.
Donnie?
I went back and watched the old Spider-Woman cartoon when we got Disney Plus. Yeah. It wasn't as good as when I was a kid, I will say. But it was nice to go down memory lane.
Sure.
Sometimes they don't age well, but the two that we've talked about before have aged pretty well. So, So we did get two small clips for one for She-Hulk and one for Moon Knight. Now, She-Hulk, I'm all for. Tatiana Maslany is a fantastic actress. She's Canadian, so I got to give her props to my homegirl.
It's the extra thumb of approval.
But we see Mark Ruffalo as the Hulk, sort of guiding her through what the transformation is, what brings it on. I'm a huge fan of the Hulk.
Likewise, yeah.
This version of Professor Hulk, and I cringe even calling him that because the comic version is so much better. True. Can we look? I know he's mentoring his cousin or whatever it is, but please don't make him a buffoon.
So I'm glad we're on the same page here, because the minute you brought up She-Hulk, I had a thought. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to be like the one guy who's like, we're on like a great wave of like agreeance and hype here. I'm like, I don't want to put the first nail of something I'm not hyped for. She's an incredible actress, and I like how it looks like.
Yeah.
I was always not worried, but I was curious. Okay, when they bring this character to the screen, is she going to be CG, or are they going to do it more practically? It looks like more practical just from her body. I think it's going to just be more of,
she's not
Tatiana's face in makeup, and maybe they accentuate like the physicality of her. But then they flash to our guy, Professor Smart, whatever you want to call it, Hulk.
Yeah.
And it's funny. In this MCU, in my opinion, like the way, to me, the Hulk and like my liking of what they're doing with the Hulk has reduced since the Avengers.
Yeah.
And to the point where I was like into the concept of Smart Hulk the first time I saw Endgame. And then over time and the way they did it, it was kind of like this weird, they kind of built this arc for him in terms of getting able to control the Hulk. And then it happens off screen, and then he's comic relief for most of Endgame. And to see him in here again, to see him, spoiler alert for people who haven't seen Shang-Chi, he may or may not, there's a version of Dr. Bruce Banner in that movie that I was actually into more, seeing him that way as opposed to this way. So yeah, I'm not big on it, but I think him maybe mentoring could be cool it could be like that redemption that like we're looking for. Like maybe he'll be really good in this iteration.
Yeah, my thing is just tone down the comedy.
Tone down 100%, the comedy. Yeah.
Right. That's all I'm asking for. And that's part of the reason why Ragnarok rubs me the wrong way, because that was the start of really, let's just make him a sideshow character. Donnie, I know you're in agreement with me, but specifically with She-Hulk, I agree with Nikko that it does look like a more practical with a hybrid of CGI for She-Hulk. And I think that's the way to go. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Oh, yes, I definitely think so. There's a number of things you can do. I think that it seems like she's mainly practical effects, but again, there are a number of versions of the way She-Hulk has been drawn in the past, you could have her losing control and becoming more savage or bigger at some point in the show. You could also, this could be the point that where we talked about with the Hulk, where for whatever reason Bruce loses control and she kind of has to bring him back. So there are
Hope he gets angry again. You get him angry.
Get him angry. Let him get mad.
That's what I waited for in Endgame. When the 3 original Avengers were fighting Thanos, I was like, Professor Hulk's going to come out of that compound and he's going to be ready to rumble. And instead, he comes out and he's still hurt. I'm like, how is the Professor Hulk still hurt? Of all the characters in comics who have a healing factor, it's the
Hulk needs the Hulk needs the anger version of Viagra, like the thing that's what he needs.
Green pills.
The green pill. It's not a blue pill. It's a green. Damn it. But side note, now I know why you like the Hulk so much, because he's green and Green Lantern, and I'm on to you, Donnie. It's all about the green. And then we got Moon Knight, which was very short. But man, I love that they're playing with his mental, like his dissociative. I think it's dissociative identity.
Dissociative identity disorder. Yes,
DID.
I want to make sure I get the right term. I don't want to just want to say it. I'm glad that they dealt with that he's nuts, but I want to get the. But no, I like it was.
That's actually what the Hulk is.
Is it?
Yes. The various versions of the Hulk, the Gamma manifests the personality.
Okay, so after as he gets more versions,
yes.
Okay, I see. I see. No, but I like the way that it was very dark. You really couldn't see much of Moon Knight at all, but man, that shot of him leaping from one side of the building to the other with the moon behind him, it was great. And then, so I'm all for that. I can't wait for that. What about you guys?
Oh yeah. I mean, like I said, this is a character that we've talked about, covering on our podcast, definitely into the live action series. So I'm all for this. Again, it's another character, lesser known, but it will be, I think, very interesting to a lot of people who don't have a lot of familiarity with this character. So.
Yeah, I couldn't. Oh yeah, sorry. No, cool. Go ahead. Yeah, no, I was gonna say it's cool because this is not a character I know very much about at all. It's not one that my dad does either. So it's kind of cool when there's a character we both get to explore together and meet for the first time. I have a really good friend, Chris Evans, not Captain America Chris Evans, but we've collaborated a lot, and he's a big Moon Knight fan. So I know he's through the roof for the show. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm a big Oscar Isaac guy. And I think it's a perfect example of, I think sometimes when you're bringing these lesser known characters to the screen, have a pretty known actor who could bring attention to the role, but also he's so good. I think he's going to absolutely eat up the changing of the identities or whatever. Already I was getting some loose cannon stuff from him in the trailer, and I was all for it. Give me unhinged anyone and let an actor go crazy, and I'm all for it. I'm all for it.
And I just started that. I've read the first 4 issues of the new Moon Knight series, and I'm loving it. So
a lot of people are saying it's really good.
It's really good. So I recommend that, and I think it's great. So yeah, I mean, like I said, there wasn't much of footage wise, but it piqued my interest, and I think the tone was pitch perfect. So I think we're in good shape.
Love that
for that. And then they turned to Spidey. And they gave us news of an animated series. It's called Spider-Man Freshman Year, I think it is.
Freshman Year.
And it's the description is kind of the idea that it is going to showcase Peter Parker on his way to becoming Spider-Man in the MCU. And it's going to be, at least from the little teaser image that we got, they're trying to mimic the style, at least it looks like, of the early comics. And I think that's ingenious.
Yeah.
I'm all for getting a Peter Parker Spider-Man origin for the MCU, and the fact that they're doing it as animated is cool.
Mm-hmm.
Here's my hope for this. Here's my warning for this series for the producers. Adam doesn't want to, and I'm talking about myself in the third person, so you know it's serious. And I'm going to say this as somebody that loves Tony Stark. I don't want to see Tony Stark once in this damn show.
Never. Nowhere near the show.
I don't want to see I don't want to see the building. I don't want to see nothing. See the armor. I'm going to put it in the scrap heap. I'd like none of it. Just, and for the love of God, if I don't see Uncle Ben in this show, I'm going to turn into the Hulk. That's all.
The Bash says I'm going to turn it sideways. And anyway.
So what do you guys think of this animated series? What are your thoughts?
So when this was announced, I was very excited because even though I don't think, and I agree with my guy, Mr. Peter Vera on this one, I don't think the recent animated stuff has even touched how good the Spectacular Spider-Man was.
Yeah,
exactly.
100%. When this got announced, there's something about Disney Plus as a streaming service. And I hate to always say this, but like, I know the money they're putting in. And then the minute I heard, okay, early Spidey, which to me is always like the relatable, grounded version of the character, which is what I've been asking for. I'm like, okay, this is another chance for a potential really well done animated show to happen. And then when I was starting to realize it was the early MCU version, I got a little cautious, but it looks like you said, Adam, they're trying to do it in the style of Steve Ditko, which is like the gold standard for me. So I'm like, okay, that's awesome. Like you said, it's ingenious. I think it's going to look incredible. To me, I'm with you too, Adam. The as big of a Spidey fan as I am, I do have my difficulty with this current version of the character with Tom Holland. I don't think he's bad by any means. It's just the material he's given, the places he's put in. I go, okay, it's not really my 100% cup of tea, but I'm always willing to let it happen.
Right. Yeah.
I'm always down for as it grows and evolves, I might eventually start really loving it.
It's Spider-Man. You're going to give it a shot regardless.
It's Spider-Man. Exactly. And he looks cool as costumes and everything.
Yeah.
So, but an early version of this character is what I wanted because I feel like you get a flash of it in Civil War, and then just when they brought him in the MCU was like right on the cusp of the big finale, Infinity War Endgame. So he's in that mix. And then his next film, he has to deal with the repercussions of it. So that's why I've always said it's not, I think, Holland's fault in my mind. It's the fact that circumstantially in the material, he has to his films, like all these characters, have to deal with what's going on. And I'm like, well, I want to see when he was just himself. And in Civil War, they talk about how he's been Spider-Man for 6 months and he's been doing it on his own. So for this show to explore him in high school, to flesh out not only his relationship with Uncle Ben, but this version of Aunt May, I think is something I've been clamoring for. Mm-hmm. I've always said, because she's younger and he's younger, the potential for them to be closer, as close as ever on screen, is something I wanted to see. And I think the show's going to do that. And this show's going to have what I want, like the homemade suit, web shooters, everything. So I'm all for it. And I wonder if Holland's going to do the voice. If not, I did hear clips of the person who did it on What If, and I thought he was great.
He sounded good. Yeah.
He sounded just like him. So I'm all for it. I'm down for a new animated Spidey. And this one's cool because it has some stake to it, right? It's going to be the early version of the character we're seeing on screen now. So I think that investment for the audience is already there. And that's going to be cool to be like, oh, wow, just like wait till you see what he does in a few years when he saves the world with the Avengers. So I think that's going to be cool. I think it's going to be cool.
Donnie, any thoughts?
I like actually how they're doing this. I didn't really think they needed to go back in his first movie and retell that origin again. Mm-hmm. But I also, it's like Nikko said here, he also kind of got caught up in the events because they retrofitted him, and it's like he got swept along for a while. And to me, this is a way of going back and saying, this is Marvel's flagship character. Okay. Mm-hmm. So let's give him a little bit of a backstory for people who really want to see this.
Yeah.
I think it's so well said. Well said, Donnie.
Yeah. Even if you don't show me the death, I just want some scenes with Uncle Ben giving him advice. That's all. Mm-hmm.
Sure.
I don't need to see him die. That can happen off screen. That's fine. So also it's a cartoon, so they don't want to traumatize children. But
Yeah.
I get it. So
Opening scene is the gun, and you're like, oh my, Disney, come on now.
Somewhere there's animated versions of Batman and Spider-Man and Superman. They're at a coffee shop. They're like, well, my parents died, and so did mine. And then Superman's like, hold my beer, my whole planet died, damn it. It's like,
it's like, oh man,
that's how it should have ended.
That's right, exactly.
The
exactly.
YouTube show, yeah.
They should do a live action version, a short of how it should have ended. I'd watch that. One of those fan filmmakers, get on that. I'd watch that.
I'd watch it 100%.
I'd support your Kickstarter. Do it. Let's go. But yeah, all right. So we've got the Disney Plus stuff. We've covered the most important bits. We're going to take a little bit of break and reset because that's what we're doing it on Zoom, and that's what they're telling me. So when we come back, we're going to do Amazing Spider-Man 75 through 77. Stay tuned. All right. So with all the Disney Plus good stuff out of the way, let's get to more good stuff, and that's comic books. Specifically, as I said before, Amazing Spider-Man 75 through 77, which is the new Beyond era for Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. So, Donnie, give us a brief summary of what the heck is going on here.
Well, this is Beyond parts 1, 2, and 3. Spider-Man 75 opens up. Peter is obviously experiencing a lot of anxiety. He has a childhood dream about stealing some gum that turns into a nightmare.
Yeah.
And a lot of this seems to be anxiety surrounding Harry's death, as well as the fact that he's in debt, which is kind of a constant in Spidey comics throughout the decades, is that even when he does well
for a little while, needs to win the lottery.
He always finds his way back to being destitute. So, yeah. What were your thoughts on that, Nikko?
Yeah. So the first one, I really dug this issue 75 because, and it's no disrespect to anyone, but I wasn't the biggest fan of the Nick Spencer run that just ended. I was in and out of it over the last few years. I thought he wrote Peter very well. I thought he wrote the character well. He was ambitious, which sometimes in comic book writing I respect, and sometimes I don't. There was a lot of playing with old stories and continuity and retconning, which I think at times was cool. Like, I'm glad they did what they did with Sins Past, but at the same time, it felt very like, if I like Spidey more grounded, and it felt so big and so crazy. And with all the clone stuff again, he's famous for having clones, right? Clones is Spidey's thing. And they even allude to it. So he's self-aware in the writing, which I like. But I did like the way they wrapped up that last issue 74. So I was very much excited to see, okay, what is the next chapter going to be? And then when they announced Spider-Man Beyond, and that Mr. Ben Reilly was coming back out, I'm a big Scarlet Spider fan. I'm one of the rare, I'm not like a massive fan of the Clone Saga, but I do defend it because that's something when I read, I thought it was so balls to the wall crazy. And I'm like, I actually respect how ridiculous this is. Like, I actually think it's amazing.
I often say that it's beautiful chaos.
That's so awesome. It's beautiful chaos. Yeah. Like just to make you think that it was really Ben for all this time. And I'm like, okay, you know what? That got me to be like, I don't even know what's going on, but I respect this. So this first issue I really like because it just like you perfectly said, Donnie, you perfectly summed it up. It brings Peter back a little more grounded than what we just had. He's dealing with his personal stuff. He's also having the trauma from the fallout of all the events with Harry and Kindred, et cetera. I like that. But I like seeing him, still be optimistic. He's got to be Spider-Man. He's back. His relationship with MJ is really solidified again, which is something that I always love to see. And then I think the cool introduction of Ben, who is that? He sees the guy, he sees the other guy smiling, and he's like, who the bleep is that? Yeah. And then I thought their exchange between the two of them was great. And I think this is a really interesting concept. The fact that we'll get into later issues, but the fact that Ben is kind of this corporations, they're trying to make the ideal Spider-Man. He's got the high-tech suit, whereas Peter doesn't. And I thought this issue, for being the first one, has a lot of personal stakes right away. And it ends kind of with this really scary cliffhanger where you're like, okay, wow, they're really changing things up. So I thought it was a great fresh start with some really cool stuff.
I like, for me, that when we open up on that dream sequence that we think is a flashback, but it's actually a dream sequence that he's having. It's part of both. It's half flashback, half dream sequence, I would say. But I like that it centers on both Aunt May and Uncle Ben. As much as I'm like, I want to see Uncle Ben in the MCU, I also like that Aunt May has an equal, footing with him in the comic books. Like they're both equally important to Peter.
Well, you got to see some of them here, Uncle
Well,
Ben.
yeah.
Like
Yes.
back of his head.
That was actually very harrowing. It's like,
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
It was.
it would have been a real nightmare if you think it's Uncle Ben from like behind in the shadow, and then when they do a close up of his face, it's actually Tony Stark. That would have been my nightmare, but I digress.
I would have put the issue down, and I would have not been on this podcast. I would have never been on this podcast because you would have asked me to do this.
I'm spreading this crap.
I would have said, "Sir, I can't come on the show, Adam. I'm sorry."
Quickly though, let me clarify what Nico's talking about here. Actually, we see in this issue that the old trademarks from Parker Industries have been purchased by the Beyond Corporation, including the name and likeness of Spider-Man.
Mhm.
So
Well said,
when we
yeah.
see Ben
Good
Reilly
point.
show up, he's the official Spider-Man of the Beyond Corporation.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I like that they did that because there are continuity. I like to call them continuity consequences, meaning stuff that happened, in the last, 5 to 10 years in the Spider-Man title actually means something.
Yes.
And it feels very like real world. The fact that, listen, you kind of sort of made this move. It was actually Octavius, but that's a whole nother ball of wax that we're not going to explain. But anyway, you made this decision. This was your choice, and now here's the ramifications of that. I like that kind of thing. When they use continuity in that manner, that's a plus for me. Just to go back to what Nico was saying about this issue, when Peter sees Ben, when one Spider-Man sees the other, he calls him, "Hey, Spider-Verse, hold up!" And I could not stop laughing. I thought that was the funniest thing in the world. And I like when they were at that restaurant or coffee shop or whatever, and they have that conversation. And they're kind of going through the fact that I get that I'm your clone, but these are still my memories. These are still my feelings. And Ben is trying to explain that I feel like I need to do this. This is my calling as much as it is yours. And I like that while that was kind of shocking to Peter, he understood that.
Mhm.
He didn't agree with it at first, but he understood what he was going through. And I like that.
Yeah. And we see that play out in subsequent issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I like that they had that spot where it's quiet in the city and they could just go to think.
Mhm.
It's like the equivalent of Spider-Man's Fortress of Solitude.
Right.
Although I'm curious, is New York ever quiet? Like wherever you go, is it ever?
The time that I was there, it certainly wasn't.
Yeah,
So,
right. So
right.
I don't know. But
So,
yeah,
that wasn't a bad thing for me. I think there are certain advantages to that. You can always find something to do. So
Always something to do.
yeah.
And what did you like? What did you actually think of for the brief bits that we got it? I like the two Spider-Men fighting in tandem. I thought that was cool.
I'm with you. Well, first of all, I love Ben Reilly's new costume. I love the spider off to the side a bit. I'm weird. I'm into like outfits and clothes and style and everything. So I think it's cool that it's like not in the middle. It's kind of off to the side. I'm like, that's different. I'm kind of into that. But I'm not gonna lie, seeing them fight and work together for, like you said, the brief moment was really cool because as much as he has, Peter's memories, and he still operates a little different, going back to his Scarlet Spider days. He was a little more brutal, a little more raw. And so now that he has all the tech in the fight too, the way they were bouncing off each other and seeing like Peter react to it was kind of funny too. Like, what is that? Like, what has he got going on here? It was cool. And I hope that, and I'm assuming that when the end of this arc comes, we're going to maybe see that again. And there's going to be another cool team up, but this time it won't end in this explosion of energy that sidelines my boy Peter.
Well, it could be worse. They could have killed him off. And
That's what I was actually. So that's my biggest thing. I was worried because the cover for issue, I think 76 was kind of how they announce Spider-Man Beyond.
Using the
And I'm
hospital-
like,
the hospital
okay,
bed.
man, I'm kind of not into this Kindred run. Don't tell me you're going to off him.
Yeah.
Don't tell me you're going to off him and do the
Yeah.
whole thing where he's dead. And then you have the return of Peter Parker for comic sales, etc.
Right.
But I like how you could tell from this issue, and like Donnie said, in the next few issues, there's a purpose to the sidelining and
Mhm.
O'Reilly stepping into the role, which I like.
Right.
And then I said, okay,
Mhm.
I really like where this is going.
Well, and what Nico's referencing here is we should point this out.
Yeah.
Both Spider-Man clash with the UFOs at Empire State U, and Ben's suit is highly advanced.
Yeah.
Peter's is the regular suit, and he is poisoned by vapor, and that's how that issue ends. And it opens up with him in the hospital.
I did like
76.
the, before we get to the, like sort of segue into the next issue. I did like how when they're working together, there's that part where Peter comes into the fray and he makes like some quip to the UFOs, and they're like, that wasn't funny the first time we heard it. And he's like, what? And then you see Ben Reilly, he's like, yeah, they don't like being made fun of. And the part where Peter's having like suit envy.
You're right.
And
Yeah.
Ben's like,
yeah.
oh, look how cool this edition is. And like, oh, it's all right. It's not that cool. And then, all right, that was kind of cool.
Classic Pete, man. Classic
I like
quips.
that. Yeah.
Classic quips.
But I'm much happier that it's just poisoning than, I mean, it's a severe form of poisoning, but it's some
Yes.
form of poisoning that, hey, we're going to kill him and it's going to last this time. No, it's not. I mean, isn't it like the 60th anniversary next year? Even if they would have
Yeah.
killed him, he's not staying dead. Come
He
on.
ain't staying dead.
Who are we kidding anymore? Death in comic books is like just taking a nap.
Yeah, because it all feels like I was actually talking to my dad about this the other day. Shout out to Pops. We're saying like the death in the last 15 20 years of comics, it feels like a marketing thing.
Yeah.
They're doing like the death of Doctor Strange, but it's the series, but they're advertising, oh yeah, he's gonna die in this comic. So it takes away from when something as early as like the night Gwen Stacy died, or when the Flash died in Crisis, right? Like it wasn't advertised, it was actually it
or when
happened.
Uncle Ben died, he's the only one.
And when Uncle Ben died,
Yeah.
it's this big thing because you're like, wow, I didn't know that was going to happen. And now it's like you read the death of Doctor Strange and you're like, okay, he's going to die. Or if he doesn't die at the end of it, you're like, why is it called the death of Doctor Strange? It's a symbolic death.
Whenever his anniversary, when he'll come back? He'll die. And then right before Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
Oh, yeah. Next
hey,
spring.
brand new number one, everybody. Come on. Like,
Just what the doctor ordered.
I'm not going to fall for this anymore. That's my question.
Can't fall for it anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think we should rate all three of them as one, like the
Sure,
first
sure,
month of
sure.
Beyond instead of individually. So, Donnie, tee us up a little bit about issue 76.
Issue 76. Aunt May gets a call from the McCarthy Medical Center where Peter is hospitalized. And at the same time, we see that Marcus is giving Ben heat for not immediately pursuing the UFOs. Colleen and Misty Knight are more compassionate to Ben's emotional state at this point. So we see a lot of kind of contrasting what's going on with Ben, what's going on with Peter. With Ben, it's more hopeful. With Peter, it's kind of going the opposite way.
It's grim.
So-
Yeah, it's a little bit grim.
Yeah. So what did you think of the opening pages, Nico?
So I really like the opening pages. I think the thing that I love seeing, Aunt May is always worried about Peter.
Oh yeah.
And there's always this, there's been various, takes. There's so much that's happened in the Spider-Man continuity since, Amazing Fantasy. But me and my dad always talk about the whole, there's always the takes where you feel like she knows, but she doesn't know, but she'll never say anything. But I love seeing her so destroyed over what happened to him. And then seeing the weight of it on Riley, right? Like when he falls to his knees, when he gets home, he's like, something terrible happened. Like it's Peter,
Yeah.
because there is such this respect for what Peter Parker is from Riley's mind. So right away, I think the issue perfectly picks up where the last one leaves off in terms of those stakes. And then you get that crazy shot where he's in the hospital bed with like the red coloring all around him. And I'm like, okay, wow, he's in bad shape, and what's going to happen here? It sets the tone.
I thought that was his like spider sense going crazy because he's in danger, and it's internal, so it's like that's how they're.
Which I liked how that played out too. It's like my spider sense is going off, but it's not an external threat. It's internal.
Yeah,
and I can't do anything about it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I like how the doctor's like, "How are you conscious? What are you, part rhino or whatever the heck it is?"
Yeah.
Oh, kind of.
Sort of. So we see that Ben goes to visit Peter. MJ is not happy with the fact that Ben split so quickly after all this happened. Mm-hmm. And an interesting scene here, we talked about this from the previous issue. Ben asks Peter for his blessing to be Spider-Man. Yeah. And Peter's like, you know what? You've earned it. Mm-hmm. And that's when another clone comes in with the money in the bank briefcase and hits him. It's like, I'm sorry.
I love that. I paid to see that actually, but no, I thought that was very important because my worry was, Nikko was worried they were going to kill Peter. My worry, once that became apparent that that's not what it looks like they're doing, my worry was, well, is Ben going to be so flippant towards Peter's time as Spider-Man? Is like, well, I'm Spider-Man now. Get over it, deal with it, right? And I'm glad that wasn't the case, because that would have just been ridiculous to me if they had done that way. So I like this, hey, can I have your blessing kind of deal? And Peter gives it. I think that respect goes both ways, but Peter also knows that I can't feel anything, so I can't do anything as Spider-Man. New York and the world needs Spider-Man, so let him go and do that while I figure this crap out.
So I'm not hyperbolic when I say this. Is this whole sequence here not only makes it my favorite issue of the three, this is some of my favorite Spider-Man stuff I've read in the last few years, and I truly mean that. It's classic Peter Parker. True Peter Parker is, like you just said, he's thinking of everyone else but himself, right? Yeah. And he acknowledges, Ben, I love the whole exchange. And he's in the bed, he's helpless. And he goes, Ben, it's hard when you're around. He says something like, it's hard when you're around. It's like I'm sharing my life. But then he goes, he's always thinking of someone else. But I can't imagine what that's like for you. Yeah. And he basically tells him, you deserve to do this. You deserve to do what makes you happy. And he's like, oh, don't worry, I'll get out of here soon. But like, you can be Spider-Man, like you're Spider-Man. And I love how he tells them to be amazing. Like that panel. I'm like, man, that sent me in a bunch of different emotions when I read that. Cause it's classic Parker. He's realizing, I think, what Ben Reilly could potentially be going through. And New York needs a hero, and it's greater than himself in that hospital bed right now. Yeah. So they need an amazing Spider-Man. So he tells him it's got to be Ben. And you see the way Ben reacts to it. I think the art really shows it well in terms of his eyes and everything, and the way MJ responds to it too. That was very meaningful for everyone in that room. I think that's the confidence that Ben Reilly needed to finally go for it. And then it's tough after that though, because he starts to seize up, and then it's like, oh.
And I really like the split image that we see where Peter is seizing, and then he's kind of going forth with confidence, and
he's putting on the costume. Yeah. And I like when he shows up, to battle the next threat, and he's like, the guy says, "Oh, Spider-Man." Is like, "Damn right, I'm Spider-Man, right?"
Oh, I love that. Man.
He went from I can't, because a couple pages earlier he was telling his handlers, if you will, I can't, this doesn't feel right. Me going out there and just continuing on doesn't feel right. But now that he's got that, basically Peter gave him the Pope blessing, go forth and
go forth in web swing. Instead of a hand, it's this. It's go forth in web swing, my son.
Or Christmas mass.
Go forth and flip, my friend. In the name of the flip, in the name of the sling.
That'd be good.
That was.
You need to do that for your guests on Italians for Spidey.
That's what we're gonna have to do. I do.
Yeah, you should.
I'm gonna talk to Pete about this, and Pops and Pete. I'm gonna feel like, all right, guys, that's how we bless our guests. Come on.
That's it. No, so I really, and you're right. The art the art in all 3 issues was really good.
Yeah, it was really good.
I don't know because I know there's different writers, handling the duties, and I think the artists are all different too. So I did like 2's art the best, even though I liked it all. But what I like about the art and the changes in seemingly each issue is that it's not so different from each other that they're jarring, and that's really, really important because I've seen some books where they've gone 3 times a month or 4 times a month if they really want to get crazy. Please don't do that. My wallet can only take so much. But I've seen when it's a different artist and it's like, this looks nothing like what I just.
Right. And I think a good example of it is the Nightwing book right now. I thought Redondo's art is like, in my mind, perfection. And then when it went over to where he's crossing over in Fear State, I still think the art's solid, but it's totally different than what Redondo is doing. So I pulled up issue. I forget what number it was, 85. And I'm like, whoa, it took me like 5 or 6 pages to be like, all right, this isn't okay.
All right, I'm used to it.
Start the issue over because I'm not even reading. I'm just looking, going, this is different. No disrespect. It's not bad. It's just different. And these from 76 to 77, when it changes from Gleason to Mr. Piccoli here. I don't know how to say that name. I'm so sorry. It still looks really good. It looks pretty similar. With like the coloring and everything.
And Gleason is amazing. Let's be honest. Gleason can do anything.
Anything, man. He's got the best covers too. He's got the best covers.
That's a great cover too.
I always say that too, by the way, Nico. I look at these names that I've only seen in print and I'm just like, okay.
That's why I'm
gonna do it. And I'm a speech pathologist too. So like I study sounds and stuff. So I'm like, okay. Oh, it's not a K, it's an H. So I'm gonna say it's Pichelli. That's probably what it is.
Okay.
Or Pichelli.
Isn't it Pichelli? Isn't it?
I think it's Pichelli.
I think it's the artist that used to do the Miles Morales stuff. I think. I'm pretty sure it's.
You might be right.
All I know, Nico, is that when the time comes to like put it out there and take the gamble, Adam always makes me do it. So
well, that's the joys of being the host. I can delegate.
Someone's got to do it.
The crap that I don't want to do, you people can do. It's great.
Someone's got to do
4 of you.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Beautiful.
I sit on the. I'm like, speaking of the Italians perspective, I'm like the godfather of this show. I just sit.
I love it. I love it.
Listen, when I got baptized, when I got picked to be the godfather of my niece, I mean, I was happy and all because I adore my niece. But the first thing I did was the Godfather theme became my ringtone.
Oh, that's hysterical!
Suddenly, I started wearing my
that's all time.
Beautiful.
That's legendary. Oh. That's exceptional.
It was great.
God bless.
I may have plotted to. Well, I'm not going to say it. I may or may not have plotted to kill people. I didn't go through with it. There were a couple of league players back in the day.
I'm glad. Yeah, that would.
There were a couple of league players
definitely
back
affect
in
the
day
podcast.
That I wanted to put a hit on, that's for sure.
So anyway, back to the story.
Now that the FBI is going to be at my house tomorrow morning when this gets released,
they're going to be like, "We were listening to your podcast. Great stuff, by the way." But
so, Spider-Man 77 opens up with a flashback. We see Ben training with Colleen and Misty. Afterward, he has a conversation with Maxine Danger, the head of superhero development at the Beyond Corporation, and she questions Ben's commitment after he took off his suit to go visit Peter. So what'd you guys think of that?
I'll let Adam kick this one off.
Well, okay, I thought it was cool to see Misty and Colleen.
Yeah.
And mainly, look, I'll be on the full disclosure. The main reason I know them is because of the Netflix Marvel stuff. Mm-hmm. That's my exposure to them. But I'm like, oh, cool. People like kind of sort of know.
Right.
I thought that was cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
I thought it was cool too how I'm a sucker for action in comics, and I just like the way he's drawn. He's kind of swinging around him, and I like how it's interesting how they're the Beyond Corporation is monitoring him as well. You know, they're saying, "Oh no, he's kind of slow today. He's distracted or whatever." And then of course, like Maxine Danger, all these like characters that are in charge of these corporations, like they always have like the wildest names. Like here's Maxine Danger, and you're like, "Oh, I bet she's a shady character."
I'm just gonna say this right off the bat, and may kind of not be PG-13, but that either sounds like a stripper name or a porn star name.
I'm with you 100%. That's actually what I thought of, because
I don't know what you guys are doing over there at Marvel, but that's what it sounds
because
like.
I'm gonna say hypothetically, not any knowledge, hypothetically, I do believe there is someone in that realm with Danger as the last name. So that is what I thought of.
So
it's just inevitable, right?
Don't Google that.
Don't Google it.
And if you're 18, do whatever you want. Go nuts.
Yeah, it's true. We do not.
Just recently on the Emerald Echo podcast, which is about Green Lantern, we were talking about, we saw a young Granny Goodness, and Adam and I were theorizing, is it Mommy Goodness or Auntie Goodness? And then we wanted to tell people, don't Google that. Don't Google any of that, because you might not like it. That seems like it could lead to some bad results, And
100%. And so just to close on this Maxine Danger thing, I like how we're seeing Ben also deal with this pressure too, of like, he is being Spider-Man. He gets to be Spider-Man finally. Yeah. But there's almost like a catch, right? He's being studied. He has to train. He has to go to mandatory therapy. And you can tell he is distracted. With
Dr. Kafka.
Dr. Kafka. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Great reference there. And I think it's cool, because what I interpreted from it too, that's not necessarily said, it's implied, is that he's also still thinking about Peter. So there still is this, which is also classic Spider-Man. And that's also where I feel like his traits of Peter are in there, always thinking about someone else, or always worried about something else, he's trying to balance. So, but it's so interesting to see this version of Spider-Man and this hero, like, one, he has to train, he's being watched. Then he has like mandatory therapy. It's like the mandatory mental health training. Is our employee okay? Is he satisfied? But also, is he doing his job? Because I like when she says, like, are you the guy? Because if you're not the guy, I need you to be. And he's like, no, like, I'm the guy. So it gives Ben this extra personal conflict too. It's not just, I have to be Spider-Man worried about Peter. I have to be Spider-Man, and I have to coexist with the, I guess, criteria of the people that are bringing me here.
And I want to get your thoughts, Nikko. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Adam.
When she said, are you the guy? I said to myself, wait a minute. Who else are you going to go to? You're going to go to Miles? Like, they're
going to go to Doc Ock again, and they're going to go back to Superior.
No.
So I wanted to get your take, Nikko. It seems that Ben, during that session, he's having some problems with his memory. What do you think's going on there?
So that's a great question, and I'm glad you brought this up, because I wanted to talk about that. That to me was a pretty impactful moment of the issue, where he's telling a story, and it's clearly drawing from Peter's memories, and then when he can't remember it, almost like a deja vu. I'm wondering if the radiation is affecting him too. That's maybe one of my guesses. My guess is also, maybe he's been doing this for so long. Maybe we're going to find out that when you're a clone, after a certain amount of time, the memories start to go away. Okay. Or a third one I have that can be, I think, depending on the way they write it, can end up being pretty powerful, going back to what they do in like Raimi's Spider-Man 2, where him doubting it and the internal conflict is kind of muting his powers. I wonder if all this pressure on him is starting to eat away at the memories he has, and
such
how
a beautiful that was a beautiful scene, by the way. Beautiful sequence where in Spider-Man 2, where he was losing his, like, how it correlated with his mental state.
Yeah.
Like, I love that they do that kind of stuff, because
I wonder if it's
kind of realistic. When we're having a bad day, we're not at our optimal performance. That's
right. Yes.
In the context of all this fantastical stuff, that's some real world, like fallout that happens to I think everybody. So
well said.
It's cool.
Yeah. So also in this issue, we see that Peter's in a coma. MJ has made calls to various people like Doctor Strange and Tony Stark, but to no avail. And so we see there's a scene where she looks at May and's like, we might be on our own for this one.
I got to tell you guys, when Aunt May says, "Did you call Mr. Stark?" I'm like, I swear to God, if he picked up and they bring him into this stuff again, look, I'm saying this as a guy that loves MCU. Tony Stark was my favorite character for the longest time, but they've over jammed him in every friggin', the first 13, 14 movies. It's like,
totally agree with you.
And now, Mysterio's whole thing is, I used to work for Tony Stark. What's next? Like, are they going to go to the flashback? Here's what they're going to do to us in that animated series. Uncle Ben used to work as a
God. I can't, Adam, I can't do it. I won't let it happen. I'll go to the offices myself and change the scripts.
That's the thing for me.
We'd have to label that podcast as like MA because Adam's head would explode and there'd be gore everywhere. We wouldn't be able to put it on YouTube.
And then after that, they'll bring in Iris West just to piss me off.
We are the Spider-Man.
Oh, please, no, stop that. No.
You set yourself up for that one.
We are the Spider-Man.
Yeah.
MJ is going to say that in the last issue of the Beyond arc. That's what's going to happen.
We are Spider-Man.
I can feel it.
Yeah. Well, that kind of works here with Ben and Peter. We are
Spider-Man.
Okay, yeah,
makes sense.
Yeah.
Iris has no business being the Flash. He sleeps with the Flash, but that's about it. But
So we actually see how Ben is getting around so easily. That's been something that was kind of a question, in the previous issues. He has something, I don't know if there's a specific name for it. It's like a portal or a Stargate that he's actually using to get around to like criminals in the city.
That's a great film, by the way. Yeah. I love Stargate, by the way.
That's a good point.
Great movie. Kurt Russell. That's a good movie.
Have you seen that before, Nico?
The Stargate. That's what we're going to call it.
Spidergate. So I like this because once again, I think it does two things. It explains how he just pops up everywhere. And it's cool, comic books. I think comic book films, like the portals are always like a thing, so just like a trope. But yeah, right on your left. But I also do like, because I think what they're doing, they're doing a nice job of like laying these breadcrumbs to something bigger. I like seeing how big this Beyond Corporation is and how many tools they have. Because my guess is there's going to be a conflict between them and Ben, and it's going to be big. So to just see all this stuff he has is kind of showing you their power, and whether or not they could take it away from him, they could shut him down. They have kind of influence when he goes. It's setting up this really interesting thing that I think the comics in the past, when you think of the films and the comic, like a good example would be Civil War, both in the comic and on film. Steve is worried, about agendas, them choosing where these heroes go and them having the resource to put them in certain places. And I think we're going to eventually see this take more of a toll on Ben than it already is. So it's cool though. I'm down for the teleportation, because it also
I can use one of those.
Lets them get right, and it lets them get to places quicker, which is important.
Oh, I would love to have one of those instead of a car.
Oh yeah,
sign me up for that.
Yeah. So this issue ends with Ben goes through that portal, and we see Morbius standing over a group of people in lab coats in an alley. I don't know whether they're doctors or lab techs or whatever, but Ben instantly goes into action because he thinks maybe Morbius has done this. We never get confirmation as to whether he did it or not. But here Morbius easily overpowers Ben, and Ben's like, I don't remember him being this powerful, but Morbius bites him on the neck, and that's how the issue ends.
What a cliffhanger! I gotta say that.
Love a good cliffhanger.
And
also,
perfectly timed for Halloween, because remember, this is the October thing. So again, the strength of Mysterio ties back to a previous arc, which I liked, and I think the quips were on point. Where that Ben was pulling off, and so I like that whole sequence, and just seeing that made me excited for. It reminded me that, hey, Morbius is actually coming as a film, and I'm actually excited for it. So I liked it. I thought it was a great way to end off this first month of the Beyond era. Yeah.
I do too. I love seeing him because I'm a big fan of that character as well. I think he's a great Spidey character. So when I turned the page and it showed him, I'm like, oh man, he's gonna fight Morbius. Like, let's go. Like, let's go. Like, I've been asking for this now. Like, Sinister War was cool in terms of how many villains, but it also felt ridiculously overwhelming. I'm like, okay, I hope in Beyond, one of the things I said on an earlier podcast is, okay, I hope in Beyond, I hope we just see some one-offs with these classic villains. And when I turned, I said, okay, he's going to fight Morbius. This is dope. And then when he was commenting on how he's stronger and faster, and he wasn't talking, he was just making noise. So I don't know what's influencing this version of him, but it was cool. And it was also cool to end in a cliffhanger, because even though we figure Ben's going to be okay, because the solicitations tell us he's Spider-Man for a little bit longer. Don't read the solicitations if you don't want spoilers, folks, because they start telling you a lot of information. But it was still cool to end it like, oh, he got bit in the neck. Leaves me hanging for, which we don't have to wait long for these because they're 3 times monthly. So I'm like, all right, I'll go a week, and I find out will Ben Riley survive? Tune in next week to Amazing Spider-Man 78.
Same spider time, same spider channel.
Same spider time, same spider place. Thwip, webheads.
All right.
To hear Morbius go plasma.
Yeah, the hand suckers.
So I always loved that on the animated series that they wouldn't say the word blood. It's always plasma.
Yeah, it's plasma. Yeah. So we're off to. I think overall we're off to a good start. So let's go around the table here with the invisible table. You can't really see one, but and let's give our rating. So Nikko, how we do it is we do 5 for art, for story, and 5 for art. So over
out of 5, yes.
Over the 3 issues, what do you think?
Perfect. So earlier I said issue 76 was some of the favorite stuff I've read. So I think that elevates all 3, even though I've genuinely enjoyed all 3. This is the first time, and I hate to say this because I don't want to keep crapping on the last run, but this is the first time where I've had 3 issues of Amazing Spider-Man in a row in years that I've genuinely loved, and I can't wait from week to week. So I'm going to say story. I'm going to say, do you do decimals or do we just?
I do decimals. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to say, okay, I'm not going to do decimals. I'm going to say, for me personally, I'm going to say 4 because, and I'm putting it as a 4, and I don't know if that's high or low for you guys. It's just me. Because like I said, this run needed to do so much to hook me back on just reading Spider-Man, and it has 100%. Awesome. The reason why it's not a 5 is I just think I would save a 5 for something like monumental, like the 3 Jokers or something that was like that brilliant. I'm going to say art. I'm going to go 4.5. I think the transition from 76 to 77 is different, but I think it's still solid. But the art in those first 2 are exceptional. Once again, I'm a big Gleason fan, so I'm biased. So I'm going to say story 4 and art 4.5 because also I'm biased. The cover for 77 I love because it feels like an older cover.
Yeah. When
they had like the hero in action with the talking points, like, can we talk about this? Oh, I'll take that as that's like 60s stuff right there. Yeah. So I'm biased with those, but so 4.5 or 4 and then 4.5.
Awesome.
Okay.
Donnie?
As far as writing goes, I'm going to give it a 4.5. I just love the humanity that was on display here.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And as far as the art, I'm going to give it a 4. I really, really liked it. There were a couple of characters I would have liked to have seen drawn a little bit differently, but it was very good all the way through. Even with the transition, that didn't bother me. So
for me, everything all these guys said, but my grade is a 4.5 for story and a 4.5 for art. What? I'm hooked. Bring on the next 3 weeks, next a few months. My wallet's going to hate me, but such is life.
Hey, all you have to say is Spider-Man and I'm in, you know?
Yeah,
exactly.
Likewise.
Nikko, it's been a blast. Thanks for joining us. Quickly before we wrap up, because it's running down here. Social media plugs, go.
I'll be quick. Just first and foremost, it was an honor. Anyone who allows me to talk about Spidey is just a legend in my book. So for everyone, if you liked what I said today, you might not, but also if you don't, you could tell me that you don't. So you could follow me on Twitter Instagram and Letterboxd at Nikko Caruso. That's NIKKOCARUSO. I do a show with a really good friend of mine and my father called The Vigilante 1939. You can follow that on Twitter. And as they've alluded to on the show, an Italian Spider-Man show with my man, Mr. Peter Vera from New York City, Italians for Spidey.
Perfect. They know how to find us, Donnie. We'll skip
Yes.
the social medias this time around. Until next time, we hope you enjoyed it. We hope you enjoyed Nikko. See you next time. Same Spider time.
So long,
same
everybody.
Spidey channel. So long, everybody.